You think you just fell out of a coconut tree?
Breaking up an encampment.
CNN projects that Donald Trump has been...
Get in, loser. We're talking about politics and the youth. For years, we've been entrapped in yet another manufactured culture war. As a society, we eat this up. We like to feel invigorated, as though we're at war with a shadowy, powerful, ideological opponent. This one, the 16-year-olds on the internet. We call them Gen Z. The question, why are they like that? The answer, well, after months of investigating, reading research papers, collecting interviews, on-the-ground reporting, and finally stringing together a semi-cohesive, semi-literate, semi-medicated thesis, I think I have one for you. And it's not good. But let's have fun, right? You know, fun, summer video, yeah. No more sad stuff. But for real, is Gen Z doomed or like what? Time is a fickle, bisexual ghost. You make one YouTube video, you blink, suddenly it's 10 years later, your childhood can be tracked through the progression of your digital footprint, your attention span has been rotted by a powerful machine designed to infect your neurons with sludge. You hurt the people you love the people who hurt you, and still somehow you only have like 50,000 subscribers? That's what all of Gen Z is going through. Not just me, I asked them. This is what they told me. I would know. Let's talk about the politics of Gen Z. Let me give you a basic overview. I'm gonna bounce around for a sec, but just like, stay with me here. If you wanna reach the heart of this topic, we must first understand, what is Gen Z exactly? What does that mean? I mean, on the surface, it's a generation, an age demographic, a collection of Adderall addicts and furry sympathizers. But I have a different answer for you. And of course, it involves media manipulation, a government plot, a crumbling economy, and a feeling of powerlessness to do anything about it. This video plays a lot better if you're wasted. Get on board this roller coaster with me, I guess. We're gonna go check on these teens. I shouldn't say it like that as a YouTuber. And I'm gonna spoil the end for you right now. I believe the only way to save Gen Z is if we cancel Eminem. Everybody's always talking about it, nobody's actually doing it. Guys, this could be the move. So, what's up with Gen Z? I've put together a comprehensive PowerPoint because I'm very good at my job. The first part of the perceived causes for Gen Z's political inclinations is their palpable lack of trust in the government. And also probably like Instagram or something. I am speaking from an American perspective, but whether you live in walkable America, cold America, upside down America, or still reeling from the effects of America, I'm sure you can apply this general trend to the situation in your country. You see, the current iteration of the world we live in is connected via a series of internet superhighways that dictate the ideas you engage with, the thoughts you have, and the beliefs you find acceptable. I'm gonna need you to look me in the eyes right now. I'm talking to you. Get off your phone. Therefore, those who control the access to and content of these superhighways hold incredible power over the ideas we share and engage with. I'm well aware I sound like your right-wing conspiratorial uncle right now, but just hear me out. Social media is seen to only confound this. We're continually atomized into our own personal bubbles, observing culture through a curated, self-centered, and isolated experience that both brings us together in unprecedented capacity, as well as absolutely destroys our mental health. This is what I made all those silly little videos about. Social media is by far the most standout revolutionary innovation of our lifetimes. I mean, my God, we're all so addicted to it. And that, of course, plays a massive role in how we see the world. When, I don't know, certain people say phone bad, we're not talking about Google Maps. No, the phone is Instagram. The phone is TikTok. The phone is Twitter. That's why it's bad. Your phone is not ontologically evil. You just have problems with moderation. And that's okay. The first step is admitting, but... And I want you to think about this. Is social media truly evil to the degree the media often portrays it as? I mean, how many news stories have you seen recently about teen phone addiction? What ideas are we as a society worried they're gonna uncover? What are we afraid of? We'll put a pin in that for now. Okay, so what is Gen Z? I mean, yes, it is literally an age demographic. Generation Z, or Z if you live in worse America, is simply the name given to the group of people born between the years 1997 to 2012. Depending on who you ask. The very concept of generations is supremely flawed. I have a sister who was born in 2012, but she's obviously much more oriented towards Gen Alpha, not Gen Z. She says things like skibbity and tells me I have Riz. so I don't talk to her anymore. But from a cultural standpoint, Gen Z comes with a lot of baggage. You know, gay, snowflake, socialist, all being common ones. These are stereotypes we assign to this group because, to be fair, they're entirely true. But as a society, we have a weird fascination with ascribing these obscure and downright stupid generalizations to entire age demos for the purpose of control. Where am I going with this? Explaining the news media in 30 seconds or less. The older generations are told to fear the younger generations because they pose a threat to the status quo. They want radical change. They like socialism now. They drink $9 coffee. We shouldn't listen to their ideas. Most importantly, their ideas should be discredited. Make no mistake, this is media manipulation for the purpose of controlling the ideas and thoughts deemed acceptable in society. It is done so that the people at the very top of financial and social hierarchy maintain their positions as such, and no one gets any radical ideas in their head. And if that seems like an insane thing to say in the first 3 minutes of a YouTube video you're not even sure if you want to watch yet, I want you to take a good look at the red bar at the bottom and just see how much longer you have left, and just really spare a passing moment of thought for the girl that has to live with this as her mind 24/7. You will never know my pain. So, the second part of this is simply that the world is getting worse, yet we care so much more. You see, we live in a time where hope for the future is rapidly diminishing. Things seem to get more and more bleak every year. The grim realities are on full display. Tragedies behold you the second you turn on your screen. And that's the world a whole generation of people are growing up in. But despite all of that, this new generation still feels determined, persistent, fresh-eyed, and hopeful. The horrors of the world have never been more evident, and it's truly exhausting. But in April of 2024, something interesting started happening. Thousands of students at hundreds of universities across the country set up encampments on college campuses to protest the continual funding of the ongoing, well, you know. These protests are brave and inspiring, but they're also relatively tame, and they aren't the first of their kind either. We'll come back to this later as well. I wanted to understand why it is Gen Z is like that. You know what I mean? If you're a loyal Mia Cole fan, you'll definitely know what I mean. There's a certain cultural archetype of a Gen Z individual, a stigma that follows this age demographic. And so it's at this point I should confess, I am a Gen Z. I know. People who were born in 2004 turned 20 this year. It's so over for you. And when I see conversations being had about my generation, it makes me want to throw myself out of a window. And whether it's out of genuine curiosity or, as some in my life would argue, morbid self-indulgence, I am fascinated with myself and those around me. Though mostly myself. Gen Z's political leanings are often described as far left-leaning. This is the snowflake generation. Our minds have been rotted due to fluoride and participation trophies. And also we're really gay. Though I wouldn't know anything about that. As you can tell from my makeup, bangs, general demeanor, men love me. And third of all, we feel powerless. And powerlessness is a scary thing. When you combine a disappointment with how the world is going and then a lack of trust in the people who are put in charge to fix it, you get a bad mix of emotions. Powerlessness is what I will eventually argue is the defining feature of this generation. Not pronouns, not silly TikTok trends, but a deep distrust and discomfort with the system and where our world is supposed to head from here. This is only the third piece of a much larger puzzle. I care about this issue deeply, and I think I'm the best person to cover it because I'm so entrenched in it right now. I speak from personal experience, my words informed by my upbringing as an internet niche micro-influencer or whatever. This is real. This matters. This matters so much. Because whether you like it or not, this is our future. This is who is going to change the world. And if you don't listen to us, we might just have to do something about it. Okay, who's ready for part one? I can't tell if any of that came off as like enlightening or like schizophrenic. Well, anyway. Inside all of us, there are two wolves, visionary genius and depressed. And for certain people, those two wolves are going at it. And that's not okay. Because they're both boys. So this all starts for some reason with a man by the name of Scott Galloway. God, I hate video essays. Scott Galloway is an NYU professor and serial entrepreneur. according to Scott Galloway. You may know Galloway from his show on Vice or CNN Plus for like a week. But if you were anything like me as a 12-year-old, which is to say, not autistic, but definitely something, then you might know him from the YouTube channel L2, where he discussed how companies were doing and how it affected their stocks. I've never traded in the stock market, but if you asked me in 2016 about buying Boeing, I would have told you I saw this coming from miles away. I stumbled onto a TED Talk he did recently called How the US is Destroying Young People's Future. And it starts like this.
I have 44 slides in 720 seconds. Let's light this candle. I've had 4 TV series in the last 3 years. 2 of them have been canceled before they were launched, and 2 were canceled within 6 weeks. Let's recap. Bloomberg, the most trusted name in financial news. Not for long.
Yep, he's like the man version of me 40 years from now, assuming academia does in fact successfully gain stock me, which I won't let it. I don't have a 4.0 because I'm smart. I have a 4.0 because I feel like a deep desire to be better than everyone. Which is toxic. Google, change my slideshow. In the latter half of the TED Talk, Scott makes 3 points, which I find very interesting. In laying out the many ways the US screws over the youth, he points to representatives, economy, and social media. Sounds like my kind of guy. You see, I, Mia, believe that Generation Z, or Z if the image of a dentist scares you, has a substantial lack of trust in the government because they feel politically, economically, and socially isolated from prosperity in said categories due to the people at the very top not extending a critical look or ear to the problems facing the youth. Simple, but that's too simple. That's just too simple. It's not that the system no longer works, no. It's that the system has been deliberately changed not to work. Yes, that's it. It's rigged. The system is rigged against us. Scott, I figured it out. Here's what Scott has to say about the political state of the US.
This is fucking ridiculous. How is this happening? Because our representatives are in fact representative. Old people vote. Washington has become a cross between the land of the dead and the Golden Girls. If I sound ageist, I am. And you know who else is ageist? Biology.
God, I love ageism. Isn't ageism great? Freaky. He then connects this disconnection with regular Americans to the current state of the economy.
Dying would be bad, but what would be tragic is if we let the NASDAQ go down and guys like me lost wealth. So we pumped the economy, which again increased the massive transfer of wealth. The best 2 years of my life, COVID. And who has to pay for my prosperity? Not me. Future generations who will have to deal with an unprecedented level of debt.
See? Now the grand American disillusionment is starting to take form. It's not a conspiracy. Too many look at these problems as if a shadowy cabal was preying on the downfall of the youth. And that's just not the case. And also probably anti-Semitic. No, it's so much simpler than that. Rich people in power want to stay rich and in power, and sometimes even people. So come on, Scott, let's connect that final piece of the puzzle and hit that baby home. What? Come on, Scott, let's see it. How does the isolation and simultaneous aggressive interconnectivity of social media provide this icing on the cake to this mountain of a problem?
Oh, but wait, what could be worse? It's as if we let an adversary implant a neural jack into our youth to raise a generation
Wait, what?
of civic, military, and business leaders that hate America.
Scott, no.
How can we be this stupid?
Scott! You have no idea how much it pains me to say this. I don't even want to. In defense of TikTok...
Is it just me, or is Mia Cole really hard to pin down?
Let's talk about TikTok. We all know my history. I don't have to get into it all here, but to sum up this 70-minute video essay, not a fan. However, I have recently conceded that TikTok does some real good. In my last video, I discussed the positive effect of information about Palestine being shared on the app. It's this spread of information, especially from Instagram and TikTok, that has driven more young people to care about the cause and mobilize a movement. And I stand by that, and I'm gonna double down. I'm conflict averse and very argumentative. God wants me dead. TikTok, for all its terrible qualities, has become a cultural melting pot for young people by young people. Gen Z doesn't just consume brain rot, though that is most of it. We're also having conversations about the world, deconstructing lies taught to us by industry, and building a vision for the society we're gonna inherit. My channel, I hope, provides a substitute place for these conversations to take place. But unfortunately, you can't scroll me. Hey, so if TikTok really is the place where young people are building this open forum for discussion to be had, furthered by the death of Twitter and failure of threads, it only follows that someone is gonna come along and wanna take control of it. Foreshadowing is a literary device. The United States government wants to ban TikTok due to its ties to the Chinese company ByteDance. For this next section, please feel free to take a shot every time I say something that you can't quite tell is either problematic or based. So this was billed as a national security issue due to Chinese laws surrounding a data surrender privacy thing, which is a real concern. However, a counter-argument, some Congress members in their hearing didn't seem too concerned about these Chinese privacy laws. Some Congress members are also deeply concerned with, I don't know, the concept of Asian people.
Are you a citizen of any other nation?
No, Senator.
Have you ever applied for Chinese citizenship?
Senator, I serve my nation in Singapore.
Do you have a Singaporean passport? Do you have any other passports from any other nations?
No, Senator.
Have you ever been a member of the Chinese Communist Party? Have you ever been associated or affiliated with the Chinese Communist Party?
It's racist, but it's so absurd, it kind of loops back around to being comical. Like an early Bo Burnham video. The government wants us to think this is solely for the purpose of protecting the American populace from data privacy concerns, something they have always cared very deeply about. This is all great stuff. So, it'd be a real shame if, I don't know, there existed, like, let's say, a video of, let's say, Senator Mitt Romney in a keynote conversation with Secretary of State Anthony Blinken where he says the quiet part out loud. That would be really unfortunate.
Yeah, a small parenthetical point, which is some wonder why there was such overwhelming support for us to shut down potentially TikTok or other entities of that nature. If you look at the postings on TikTok and the number of mentions of Palestinians relative to other social media sites, it's overwhelmingly so.
Oh no! That's like the quintessential example of the deep distrust young people have with the government. Who put that there? These are the people we're supposed to trust with our best interests for how the country's supposed to be run? Okay.
For me personally, I think in general, I really kind of don't trust the government. I don't.
I think I trust the government to like a certain extent.
No. Just straight up no.
No. Generally no.
I know a lot of instances where like the government has abused their power and really there's no repercussions because they are the system.
Because they don't care about the people. It's very obvious. They're all about media propaganda.
I don't trust them fully. There are definitely aspects of the government that I for sure like do not trust. For instance, like I would say the police department.
Anything that like the government has implemented hasn't come from them doing it just out of the grace of their hearts. It's come from force. It's come from people literally forcing it to happen.
Like every single politician has ulterior motives to what they say because like their public image is really important to them and important to how they maintain their power. So I think that it's important to be skeptical, even if it's someone that you generally agree with on like a lot of social issues.
By the nature of being in power, it's really hard for them to have my interest in you because the people in charge are very different to like someone like me. They have a huge amount of wealth. They have a huge amount of like influence in the world.
I think that American politics have always like their main goal has always been to protect wealth.
Wealth is not seen as like a lifeline or seen as like a support. It's seen as it's like a lifeline in the sense that they use it to gain something rather than like use it to lose it.
I mean, obviously there are differences in goals between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, but I think at the end of the day, economics is always going to be the most important thing. And I don't see that changing anytime soon, especially with like our current two-party system.
You look like a lesbian. This distrust young people feel in the government permeates many parts of society. It shapes how we see the world. However, the unfortunate truth is Gen Z is not the only group on social media. I know, I was scared too. Sometimes I go on Twitter. A shameless plug. So I've been running a little experiment. On Twitter, I don't follow anyone right now because I'm obnoxious. Let's be real. That's an obnoxious thing to do. Like, who do you think you are? I'm aware. I'm aware that I'm obnoxious and pretentious. That's why you like me. However, this has proven to be a valuable superpower as I have the ability to check up on the Gen Xers and they are not well. My Twitter feed is the default marketplace of ideas for 40-year-old men who have been inundated by conspiracy theories. And I guess I like that. I don't know. And that might be a real issue. And I'm just not going to unpack that right now. I'm destined for greatness and doomed to make video essay. This is all very not normal behavior, to be sure. Yet this algorithm is actually doing what it's designed to do. Social media is an echo chamber. We know this. It's so easy to look at this and go, That's not normal. That's just not normal. These are bad opinions. They're not right. It's a good thing my opinions are very good and also right. But I use it to remind myself that this is probably what my politics looks like to someone who doesn't agree with me. I don't even want to make this video. I don't want to talk about politics. Let's be honest right now. Talking about politics sucks. I and many other in my generation probably want to be apolitical. Being apolitical is cool, but I'm making this because it's important and I care about this. I care about this a lot. And so does my generation. And I want to correct the record because we get a bad reputation for the things we believe in. Let's be honest. I've had very long and detailed conversations with many different members of my family recently, just trying to help them understand like just what all of this is. What is this feeling? What is this anger? What is this resentment? What is this cultural awakening that's going on with the younger generation? Why do they feel this way?
Kamala Harris is a brat. I hated saying that.
I cannot think of a better example of the power and also horror of social media than Kamala Harris's media team branding her entire online image around Charli XCX's album Brat. Oh my God, we're so doing this. This new marketing move for the presidential nominee here in the US is interesting, to say the least. One I, as a YouTuber who covers this stuff, didn't think would pan out, honestly. Stitch incoming. You see, I assumed wrongly that Gen Z was tired of being pandered to. That this generation was, sorry, I'm looking at the beauty of nature. That this generation was above the idea of a presidential nominee co-opting their thing. A former California prosecutor popping up, taking their aesthetic and running off. But then that coconut tree clip came out.
You think you just fell out of a coconut tree?
Don't get me wrong. There has been much heated discourse about this, especially amongst Gen Z. Many people online are not thrilled about Charli's album being used in this way, especially given Kamala's connection to, you know, the Biden administration and the things that have happened. However, do you remember Hillary Clinton? You see, what I failed to account for in all of this was the widespread adoption of post-ironic humor by Zoomers. I thought a politician adopting something currently considered cool by the youth would go exactly as well as it has in the past. But it didn't. Girl, some people love this. Slake is beautiful, you gotta check this out. But that number, not nearly as many as you'd expect. I'm in touch with the woke mob, they are not all in consensus. I think if Hillary did this now, public opinion would actually be so in her favor. Because being cringe is so out. Embracing cringe, that's in. And so, Kamala Harris is a brat.
Well, she was. I don't disagree that embracing cringe was in at the time. There was a real sense of hope and confidence that Harris was going to win. Things were starting to look up, but I guess, I don't know. I guess cringe isn't enough to win an election. I'm fully kidding. That would be a very disappointing fact for the Tumblr generation. Don't make me read your Wattpad. So, Harris lost the election. Badly. Not only that, she lost the popular vote. But pessimism is the thief of joy, so it should be noted. She destroyed Jill Stein. So, Harris got Clintoned. Why? Well, the easy explanation is, you know, and that's fair. I would not deny that immediately. The Republican candidate hasn't won the popular vote in like 20 years, but there's more to it than that. Did you notice enthusiasm quickly drained for her like a month after her campaign started? Everyone was just so excited that Joe Biden dropped out. It really didn't matter who replaced him. But then we got acquainted with her. And she was just, Now, here's the thing about this country. I personally don't believe a genuine progressive candidate could make it very far in the current political climate of the culture war. They would like get on stage and say their pronouns or something, and then everyone would like throw tomatoes at them. I don't see that going very well unless we got another Bernie Sanders, but unfortunately it looks like he's on his way out. Every day we are met with this political landscape of complete and utter manufactured outrage. Outrage over issues that people don't really care about. Like, conservatives, do you really care about the sanctity of women's sports? Or do you just need a bad guy for the week to pin the blame on rather than the corporations that are actually hurting you? Liberals, do you actually care that Biden pardoned his son? Do you really care? Or is that just a good enough distraction? A good distraction from the institutions that are genuinely, systematically hurting you. They want you to think you care about this, but like, do you? I'm genuinely asking. I know I don't. The people actually screwing you over are the ones in charge, the ones that head industry in secret. I'm talking about the CEOs of oil, of big pharma, of healthcare. The CEOs of healthcare are hurting you. I'm getting ahead of myself. Anyway, this video is gonna have periodic addendums because I've been working on this for like 10 months and things just keep on happening. Every week, there's a new situation, always a new situation. Every week, we are condemned to be in situations forever. Man, I really wish someone wanted to inject some nuance into the conversation surrounding what it is Gen Z actually believes. I want to inject some more nuance into the conversation surrounding what it is Gen Z actually believes. Oh, good, thank God. Because while the mainstream narrative is we may all look like pronoun-having, libbed-up communists, that's actually just not the case. It's just girls. If you're a man and you're watching this, hi boys. Sorry I exclude you so much. Then there is a chance you are what we call one of the good ones. However, one of the most fascinating trends I've noticed in Gen Z politics is this chart. Whoa. We need to talk about this chart. Let's get one thing clear. This is a small survey size, and in order to make any official call, we need more research, whatever people say before they show you statistics and then forget all that. However, these are some incredible findings from Axios and Gallup.
Women aged 18 to 29 are now 15 percentage points more likely to identify as liberal than men in the same group. That gap is 5 times larger than it was in 2000.
How could that be? Okay, if you look at the chart, something clearly happens around the mid-2010s, specifically between like 2016 and 2017. Incidentally, there was also a major spike and peak in 2020. This is all very coincidental, I think. This is a chart of how liberal men and women are. Liberals. But what's weird is men and women don't seem to go up and down at the same time. In fact, the article even goes on to say the change in men's political beliefs has remained remarkably steady over the last 25 years, with men consistently being more conservative than women. But what does this mean for Gen Z? And why are they like that?
Gender polarization could have far-reaching consequences as politics becomes a bigger part of American life. In a 2021 poll, 71% of Democratic college students said they wouldn't go on a date with someone who voted for the opposing presidential candidate.
Politics has become more and more polarized over the last few years. And this gender gap amongst the younger generation poses an existential question for the future of gender dynamics for an age demo that's increasingly gender variant. I'm reading from the script. It's also important to note that men and women aren't going to college at the same rates. They're different in the fields they go into, and of course, money. You could even say this data is all very stereotypical. I'm really good at transition. Let's talk about some common Gen Z stereotypes real quick. Let's have some fun. No, let's not have fun. Donald Trump is going to be the 47th president of the United States. Early in the morning on November 6, 2024, we found out that 77 million Americans cast a ballot for Donald Trump. Congrats, GOAT. Why does it say that in the script? Also, on November 6th, I was born. Worst birthday ever. Every text I got read like condolences for my husband, who died at war. The Republican Party, unfortunately, is kind of just at a point now where you can get on stage and proclaim that the woke immigrants make inflation transgender for China, and you're immediately handed like an untailored suit and $1 million. Go on X.com and tweet that men are men and women are women. Congrats, you got 81 million impressions and you're the next vice president of the United States. This video was ahead of its time. Just a few months after I recorded that, it became mainstream news that young men are skewing farther and farther right and young women are getting liberal at unprecedented rates, but don't worry, it's fine because they're also queer. The mainstream is so caught up with documenting this fascinating gender sorcery amongst the youth that we seem to completely overlook the basic fact that Gen Z loves gender roles. Like, we love them. Why does nobody ever talk about this? Everyone acts like Gen Z is completely liberated from the patriarchal notion of man and womanhood. But what they fail to consider is, in all actuality, it's just simply freedom to choose which box you want to stuff yourself into. I mean, yeah, non-binary people exist, and we respect them. Is that it? Girls romanticize girlhood in a way I would argue is very much akin to past generations. Makeup is not on its way out, we're just having more fun with it. Expectations surrounding date rituals are somehow getting worse. Men are currently having their own side quest, just debating how manly one can be before they lose all their hair and drop dead of cardiac arrest at 27. Are you an alpha male or a sigma male? Either way, your steroid use constitutes a class A misdemeanor. Yeah, women can go into STEM now. Yeah, what about it? You can't spank your secretary anymore. Okay. Is that the progress? Is that the progress we got? That's all? In my opinion, this progress, which it's debatable whether or not gender roles being abolished is progress or not, but either way, it's overstated, and it's often focused in the most progressive spaces of the generation. It's not the norm. Cycles beget each other, and this generation has not broken that cycle. Let me tell you, brother. Don't cut that. Don't put that in. Why would I end it like that? So Generation Z, or Z, if you've never felt the love of your parents, is deeply entrenched in politics. The feeling of economic isolation described by Professor Galloway, our propensity for more left-leaning policies, our searching for community online that both radicalizes and divides us, but is also like so beautiful and real, our growing gender divide and rates of mental health issues, all mixed together with decades of deep distrust in the way leaders of the world attempt to govern, breeds a real feeling of anger and a feeling of duty to go out and make your voices heard. Okay, I'm gonna break the fourth YouTube wall for a sec. No more performer-audience divide. I'm talking to you. Skip ahead 30 seconds if sincerity is deeply scary to you. Over the last few months, while I was attending university, I was fascinated by all of this. I was around so many different people my age. I love meeting new people, especially a few people who actually admired my work, which was amazing. I can't thank you enough for that. That's surreal. I love talking and getting to know people who are in community and out of community with me, specifically in those who disagree with me. I like seeing the differences in opinion and where our worldviews kind of intersect and leave each other. I love hearing how they see the world and how it differs from me. But more interestingly, when that difference manifests itself in similarity. We're not a monolith. We all don't agree on the solutions to these big societal issues. Hell, some of us don't even agree that there are certain societal issues. But what I have learned is it feels like everybody has this sense of dread. I feel it. They feel it. It's an uncomfortable feeling. I spoke to many people my age who feel politically ostracized and not heard but from the system, deeply misunderstood or misjudged. And I don't mean this in some college is a woke breeding ground kind of way. If you ever stepped foot on a college campus for more than like 5 seconds, you'd actually realize there's a huge diversity of opinion. And also sometimes even real diversity. So given all of this distrust, all of this unrest, what I'm trying to say is over the last 4 months, I became very fascinated by the idea of political violence. What really is it? How do people come to that as a solution? And whether or not it can be used for good or just bad. So to get to the bottom of it, I finally picked up a book that has been on my radar for some time. In his book, sickly titled How to Blow Up a Pipeline, which I'm just now realizing I forgot at home, philosopher and climate activist Andreas Malm addresses this feeling of unrest. He discusses his experiences within the climate movement, fighting against a government that fundamentally ignores the voices of him and those in his political group. He details the history of not only the climate movement, but also famously so-called non-violent movements of the last century. He explains that though pacifism is often preached through our retelling of these movements via places like classrooms or pop culture, that's actually just not really the case for the most part. And there has been a systematic effort to clean up the facts surrounding these historic movements. Those in charge want you to believe that if you just make your voice loud enough, then your political goals will somehow just be achieved. However, Malm provides a crucial counter-argument. Nuh-uh. Behind each victory is a long history filled with protesting, boycotts, and yes, sometimes even violence. I know, it's an uncomfortable truth, but you're the one that fell for the thumbnail. Deep down, you wanted this. And young people, especially the emerging generations coming of age dealing with the behest of these systematic issues, are going to be the ones to deal with this head on. In part 1 of the book, Malm addresses the history of activism and movements' past relationships to pacifism. The 3 main things I took from this are as follows. Number 1, modern activists love pacifism. If I never explained what pacifism is, insert it now. So pacifism, according to Malm, in the world of activism kind of takes on this like idyllic notion that if we all just band together and be really, really good, and also like really, really annoying, we might just get what we want. But, says Malm, this is a relatively new phenomenon. This part of the script was written before July 13th, 2024, and I've never been to Pennsylvania. Please don't put me on a list.
From the years around 1789 to those around 1989, revolutionary politics maintained actuality and dynamic potentiality. But since the 1980s, it has been defamed, antiquated, unlearned, and turned unreal.
Rachel Kleinfeld is a leading researcher in the subject. She's written many papers, including this very interesting one from the Journal of Democracy. This essay gives a detailed overview of the new age of political violence. I promise I'm not an academic. I do this all out of spite. Essentially, around the 80s, violence fell out of favor in countries like the US, at least due in part to the popular narrative that if you just, talk through your feelings, things will be fine. And that's how we solved racism, with facts and logic. Leading me to number 2. The historical image overhaul of past social movements. Nowadays, we all seem to have this brain disease that, protesting is supposed to be, chill and normal. I'm actually super normal about my rights being taken away. It happens from time to time. We'll get them back, it's fine. I agree with many other researchers that this sentiment comes from the current trend of right-wing extremists using extremist methods to get what they want. As Kleinfeld points out in the article, political violence has kind of shifted and taken a new form. In the 80s, it used to be focused on property and sending a message, making something symbolic, whereas now political extremists are far more likely to use deadly force on specific targets. And most crucially, there's been a very interesting demographic shift in who uses political violence. It used to be more left-leaning, and now it's become like a tool of the far right.
Update, left-wing violence is so back. We've never been more back. On December 4th, 2024, Italian-American racism dropped down to 0%. For but one fateful week, Americans' personal mental Berlin Wall fell and the political divide shattered, but for a brief moment in time to come together and celebrate. Twitter had some of its best days in a while. Even the mainstream news couldn't ignore the masses' utter delightment at this. Not only did Luigi get this guy, but he did it hot. If you do it hot, you're like a god. We all worship at the throne of symmetrical faces and toned biceps. For a minute there, straight men even turned a little bit fruity. I'm completely kidding. That's all the time. Now, does this mean left-wing violence is coming back for good? Probably not. This was most likely just a fleeting moment in time. At the end of the day, the corporation's lesson learned was not to quit hurting people. It was, we should probably get security if we're gonna keep on hurting these people. As celebratory as everybody was for this, I couldn't help but be saddened by it, simply for the fact that it came to this. Corporations continue to abuse their power in such an extreme way that a measure of this magnitude was taken. And not only that, it was loved by people. That's upsetting. It's gonna get worse before it gets better. But at least he was hot, though. That's fun. I like hot people. Suffragettes, not my best work.
Women didn't get the right to vote because they yelled the loudest. The suffragettes blew things up. When your rights are threatened, historically, people don't tend to take it lightly.
After the hope of attaining the vote by constitutional means was dashed once more in early 1913, the movement switched gears. In a systematic campaign of arson, the suffragettes set fire to or blew up villas, tea pavilions, boathouses, hotels, haystacks, churches, post offices, aqueducts, theaters, and a liberal range of other targets around.
Finally, number 3. For this generation, time is no longer on our side. When it comes to climate change, the issue seen as the greatest existential threat to this generation and the rest that may come after, we're fundamentally out of time. The worst has not happened. It is on its way, at speed. The emergency is already here, the cup of endurance fast running over. But the onrush of catastrophe does have a temporality of its own. It imposes tight constraints on those who want to fight. And yet, we must. We have to fight. And so, we do. And that's why I think Gen Z should cancel eminem.
The world is getting worse. The youth are not okay. This is a cry for help. No healthy individual earnestly says these words. If you have a group of people saying things like this, situation's not going too well for you. I'm just being honest here. Okay, let's get back on track here. In chapter 1, which, and it might be too early to say this, best chapter so far. Really knocked it out of the park with that one. We looked briefly at the many different economic disparities and hardships facing the youth and loosely tied it to this feeling of distrust and dissatisfaction with the people in charge. Now, Let's tie this knot up. Galloway asserts the current economic reality of the US is getting worse and worse generationally.
Essentially, as we go down generations, we're seeing that for the last 2 generations, people are making less money. The cost of buying a home, the cost of pursuing education continues to skyrocket. As we get younger, we're taking away opportunity and prosperity. This is a breakdown in the fundamental agreement we have with any society.
This leaves Gen Z, the newest generation to enter the economy, because at time of recording, Gen Alpha is not yet making money off their irreverent TikToks.
I'm thankful for net spend and being unemployed.
This leaves Gen Z not only economically and politically broken, but perhaps spiritually as well. And then he goes on to show this graph and say this.
As a result, people over the age of 55 feel pretty good about America, but less than 1 in 5 people under the age of 34 feel very good about America. This creates an incendiary. Righteous movements, cuts to our society end up becoming opportunistic infections because generally speaking, young people have a warranted envy, they're pissed off, and they're angry that they don't enjoy the same spoils and prosperity that were provided to our generation.
And that sentence right there is where the most interesting part of all of this lies. This feeling of economic ostracization creates an incendiary? Or is that just one piece of a much larger puzzle? The incendiary is not new. It's not this nebulous looming thing. It's direct, and it was created a long time ago. I have a problem with this because of the insinuation that economic ostracization alone is what leads to youth movements like we've seen in recent months. It is definitely a factor in the widespread ideologies held by the youth. However, if you are to insist that Gen Z's problem with the US government's handling of the situation in the Middle East is solely based on our economic hardships, I think that's just not a fair view analysis. And furthermore,
I think it's an incendiary poured on everything that turns any cut into an opportunistic infection. The message I'm getting mostly from students on campus is, you know what, we're just pissed off. We're just pissed off.
It feels like a bit of a blatant and deliberate misinterpretation of the movement at large. As if you were to actually spend any time within an encampment, I don't see how you could come to this conclusion. However, I very much respect Professor Galloway and his analysis of the situation. And even though I find this particular point to be subpar, he won me back over when he said this.
One of the problems I think that young people are having with this movement on campus, whether you agree with it or not, is how many spokespeople have really emerged.
Because that is undeniably true. We need a leader. We need a spokesperson, someone that can be the symbol of this. So, this isn't about money. This is about basic humanity. In the case of Gen Z, I would argue this is also even further disillusionment with the American political establishment. And, you know, the other ones in the world too, I guess. Can't forget about you guys. Bonjour. It's hard not to blame Gen Z for their disillusionment. Even regular good old-fashioned classic Capitol Hill American metrosexuals on TV news feel disillusioned sometimes. I'm acting like I don't fit into that category. Trump versus Biden was kind of like the final boss of mainstream news media. Things were not looking good for a while. Every day Jake Tapper got on my screen and proclaimed to the world for the 900th day in a row that President Epsilon was gonna go watch the throne on Sleepy Joe's ass before taking back to the keys to the city and staging a level 7 freak out in the back of America's most beloved JCPenney. And we all sat our white ass down and listened. The very idea of choosing between these two candidates left a lot of us feeling this overwhelming sense of dread and unconfidence within the American political system. And this is where I was gonna go more in depth on that, but this video has taken 10 months and that one took care of itself. Every day, Gen Z wakes up to a new headline proclaiming the very end of democracy as we know it, only to receive swift and immediate backlash for standing up for their beliefs or doing literally anything else about it besides rotting in bed on their cell phones. Something is deeply wrong with the system.
Everybody can like post on Instagram, post on like on social media their opinion and views, but like to see that manifestation of like people in person like going together, talking about a common issue.
I think it's really important to see people being passionate about something. You know, it genuinely isn't enough to post something on your story or just like send links out.
I think the importance of protesting to me is that it shows your elected officials out of an election season what your beliefs are. If there's a group of people in front of you or like in a college and it's on the news, like that's about you. Like you have to pay attention to that. Like, you have to notice it.
When it comes to going on in Palestine, in Congo, in Sudan. We've done multiple demonstrations and fundraisers for that. And then locally, when it comes to like police brutality that happens in my area, or just like economic disparities or inequality that happens, we definitely do protests against that and do demonstrations of that as well.
I've been at a protest probably since I was like 10-ish, and I've been wanting to go to protests for probably longer.
I've been to a lot of protests. I grew up in the Bay Area, Oakland specifically, and there's a long history of protests in where I live. Oakland is where the Black Panthers started.
I went to some protests for Palestine. I went to March for Our Lives.
Historically, it has helped them. It has brought good social change. So.
It's no secret things are politically weird in the US right now. I started writing this video in February, and let's just say it got more complicated since then. But one issue has remained unchanged. One issue that seemingly no matter who's in charge will remain unchanged. One issue that the mainstream just doesn't care about. And that is, unfortunately, what's going on in Gaza. Gen Z so vehemently supports Palestine like no other generation. In an effort to stop getting the US to do typical US things, the youth have been on the front line. This is very normal. I don't know why the mainstream media insists on this idea that this is somehow out of the ordinary, as if Gen Z as a generation just has some unprecedented disdain for war, as if there wasn't well-documented anti-war movements throughout all of the country's history. Is it really weird that the youth supports Palestine? Or is it weird that you've grown too complacent to worry about genocide? I'm getting ahead of myself. Classic Gen Z move. Protests were documented on college campuses all throughout the Vietnam War. College students led efforts to pull crowds and engage in massive demonstrations to show the world just how strongly the American people truly felt about the anti-war movement. Tell me, do these two pictures really look that different to you?
Students are, encamped, against the war in Gaza, demanding divestment. Draw a line between this dissatisfaction and what we're seeing on college campuses right now.
Okay, I want to talk about... I can't say it too much because this platform will demonetize me for speaking about controversial issues, which makes my job incredibly difficult. Therefore, this video is somewhat censored to comply with guidelines. If you'd like to see it not censored, you can't. I made a censored video to conform. I'm a coward. And let's be honest, Nebula doesn't want this, though I'm sure it was a polite pass. I know this is an absolutely insane topic to cover for a girl that not 20 minutes ago claimed she was extremely conflict averse, but let's call it exposure therapy. The conversation surrounding takes place in two sectors of thought. The ideological one, the ideas driving the situation, the backlash to the backlash, speaking with friends and family, having arguments, picking a side. And of course, the practical one. What can I do to help? What can I do to stop my country from making this so much worse? I think this ongoing situation perfectly encapsulates everything I'm talking about in this video. I've been asked on multiple occasions by many older people in my life why it is I think this generation cares so much about this issue in particular. Or as others have put it, you didn't care before, how come you suddenly have a problem? This line of thinking is monumentally ignorant, usually bad faith, and I won't sympathize with people who know the reality of the situation and still refuse to listen to reason. Humanity over politics, humanity over profit. always. But, and I know this to be true from firsthand accounts, not everyone who is ignorant weaponizes it. It's hard to believe if you spend, I don't know, any time on the internet, but there are so many people who actually want to learn and who are genuinely curious, which is why I want to lend some good faith and explain, why does Gen Z care so much about this issue? And I think the best way to do this is to not just spout arguments at you. I want to show you the reality of the situation. I want to show you the humanity and the emotion. I want to show you just how strongly Gen Z cares about this, what they're willing to risk, and what they're willing to lose. Which is why on April 26, 2024, I attended a protest for students for Palestinian liberation to document the human reality of this situation. This is not TV. This is not entertainment. This is real. And this is what happened. So I traveled to George Washington University, a well-respected college in Washington, D.C., where I heard many people gathered to protest due to a particularly hostile administration. I'm not a student at this university, but I have infinite respect for those who are and put their education on the line to participate in this because they care so deeply. This institution costs hundreds of thousands of dollars to attend. Students are risking a monumental amount by going against their admin and continuing to protest. And they're not risking their futures for nothing. This is the most pressing issue of our time, and they care deeply about it. Next time someone cynically says Gen Z doesn't genuinely care about the people of Palestine, or that this is just some passing trend, remember this video. I was informed police watching over the protests were not hostile and had in fact denied admin's request to break up the situation. However, if we were to cross the barrier into the encampment, that's where problems would arise. Here's what happened. Just a couple days prior, an encampment was established in a section of the university called U Yard. Students had rushed the yard to set up tents with the intention on staying there as long as it took to have the university meet their demands. After clashes with police on the first night, the encampment was sealed off by a barricade. This barricade allowed students to leave, but if you tried to enter, an officer would meet you there and arrest you. By the time I was there, they were 48 hours in. Maybe a couple dozen or so students remained. The police presence was extensive but reserved. However, just because they were not hostile at the moment did not mean they were our friends. At this point, the actual encampment paled in comparison to the large group of protesters supporting them just on the other side of the barricade. There were hundreds of us.
I mean, typically the Israelis are good at PR. What's happened here?
The truth always finds its way of coming out, doesn't it? Don't use that clip if I get canceled. Okay, let's talk about it. Concern 1. Why does Gen Z care about this issue so much all of a sudden? Well, I think it comes down to 3 factors. Of course, I'm generalizing in this video, by the way. We don't all just share the same opinion on everything. I mean, come on, guys. For instance, I look like this, and yet I'm a Shane Gillis fan. It's stupid. Don't put that in. That's stupid. I'm also, incidentally, the biggest Mr. Beast hater. I have a lot of strong opinions on very notable white men. Okay, I want to explain the common media narrative as well as the reality that young people seem to be the most outspoken voices on this issue. The first, and probably most crucial factor of this being social media. Never before has something like this been so accessible, so immediate, so there. The horrors of war are usually hidden from public view, with scandal arising whenever video or photographs surface from it. Now, with the widespread use of social media, it's immediate. It's there. You can find it. It's on Instagram. Atrocities are easily viewable by harrowing first-person accounts documented from a cell phone. And people see this and are naturally disgusted. Videos from the people in affected areas in the Strip surfaced immediately on social media. Thousands of individual cries for help. The humanity displayed so viscerally palpable and so real, you couldn't look away. So young people shared these images with each other. They had conversations. They talked about how it made them feel, and a lot of us realized this doesn't sit right with anybody. Journalists from the region took note and continued to share what they saw and actively supported the youth movement as it grew. War isn't just in the streets. It's online now. War is online now. That's upsetting. You know what I mean? And if you preferred it when the public was not privy to images of this nature and of this magnitude, maybe think about what that means about you. Factor 2. Combine all of that with the already growing reported distrust in mainstream media. I don't know if you've heard, but people don't really trust the news too much. I can't imagine why. As well as said media also being found to be extremely, overwhelmingly pro-insert place. And finally, the simultaneous rise of TikTok being a growing leader in alternative news, despite my best efforts. Combine all of that, and suddenly you have a concoction for a grassroots social movement ready to be born and thrust into full of people who are rightfully furious that their country is complicit in an ongoing horrifying situation. Finally, factor 3. Switching over to opinion now, I have personally noticed a growing trend in people my age using empathy as a way to describe their politics. Hell, I would describe my politics as having an empathetic worldview. The truth of the matter is, despite the stereotypes, despite the jokes, I think a lot of us do genuinely care about others, even if we can't relate to their experience, because it's human. You can see it with your own eyes. It's human. The American war machine can't dispense that kind of propaganda anymore, because we see you. And you can't ignore that. There was very little opposition present, and only one singular counter-protester actually displaying anything at the event. Instead of bothering her, the crowd largely ignored her, except for one woman, just standing in front of her, not interacting, not causing a scene, just standing there, holding a sign that read, "Choose your side in history now." I found this image incredibly moving. At this point, several camera crews had surrounded the protest and were eager to go live for local evening news. While the organizers continued to gather people, music was blasting and energy was high. Then, the sun started to set. Concern 2. Why college campuses? Ah, yes. Why obstruct your fellow students' ability to learn? This is, I will say, at least the most good faith argument I've heard. I disagree, but I get it. So this one is twofold. For starters, colleges in America have been accused of investing hundreds of millions of dollars into companies in place. This, of course, is a problem because investing money into a country actively engaged in is aiding them, which is bad. It's hard to find good data on just how much or when these investments are made, and that's in part due to the lack of disclosure within these universities' investment portfolios. Hence the frequent chant, disclose, divest, we will not stop, we will not rest. Okay, it should be pointed out that the issue of divestment is very complex and perhaps not the solution the movement at large probably wants it to be. The issue with divestment is many universities don't actually know where this money is going, and to ask them to make sure that it's not going to any unseemly sources is a lot more complicated than we would like to believe. And furthermore, it's probably not enough to make any real substantial impact. Yes, it's true, we don't have the full details, but more than likely, there's reason to believe that it's not really gonna do much. But enough of that. Like, yeah, that's important to note, but I worry about how productive conversations like that are. It's very reminiscent of leftist infighting. I think if the core of the cause is noble, then endlessly debating the fine, minute details surrounding it is not that productive of a conversation to have. Endlessly debating fine details and drawing lines in the sand is not going to get us anywhere. I wanted to cover the issue of divestment because it was definitely a big part of this protest. However, the overarching point of the encampment was for the purpose of solidarity, not divestment. And that solidarity is far more important. But yes, as I said, colleges investing money or anything else into things located in place is a problem. It's extremely problematic as it aids a country that's engaged in war crimes, as well as directly involving students' money, which is a huge problem. Students who pay, and I cannot stress this enough, so much money to attend this university deserve the right to know where their money is going. Furthermore, the second part of this argument, why college campuses? Can't you just do the protest somewhere else? Some of us are trying to learn. Well, college campuses are, of course, going to be a hotspot for something like this. The student bodies of a university are some of the most politically engaged people in a country, especially in this case, one in the heart of Washington, D.C. And thus, a college campus where they're all concentrated is a likely location. And at this point, I should definitely mention, this is not at all, by any stretch of the imagination, somehow a new phenomenon. Like, this has been the case for decades. So this breeds a perfect environment for people to show their support for an issue. We weren't just chanting for financial disclosure. Of course, that's part of it, but it's also about showing support for the people of who our government at large, may I remind you, wants us to forget. These protests at large aren't just aimed at the university. They're aimed at the system as well. It's especially at the protest I was at, as GW is located 5 blocks away from the White House. Joe Biden was in the area. They want us to forget these people, the Palestinians. And we won't, but I'm not going to forget. And many others in our generation will never forget nor forgive our government for doing what it's done, for supporting this. Do you know how much 40,000 is? Immediately upon losing, the Democrats went into full-blown infighting. And I don't know if you've ever seen a liberal meltdown, but it's very similar to a conservative meltdown. Many took to social media to proclaim the reasons as to why the Dems failed, including but not limited to LGBT people, the Middle East, and of course, Gen Z. One of the main things I heard was that Gen Z voters did not turn out en masse because of this issue, because they didn't agree with what Harris and Biden did. And yeah, but I want to make it clear, I don't think that's why she lost. This is a much smaller group of people than what the media makes it seem. But yeah, she definitely lost some voters because of it. Anecdotally, my friends are pretty far left-leaning, as I'm sure you've noticed, and yet almost all of them still voted for Harris, despite knowing that if she were to win, they would be protesting her administration to do better on this issue. And many made the argument for others to do the same, because unfortunately, a protest vote, or lack thereof, still helps the other side. However, like has been reported time and time again, I do know some people who purposefully opted out of voting. And they did this because they would have felt complicit. Their argument is that participating in the system where both candidates would have still continued to fund some atrocities is being complicit in those atrocities. That's their argument. And I understand it. I understand it on a moral level, even if I disagree with the effect of this belief. But on the other side, my Muslim friends who chose not to vote because they have family or friends or know people living in the region who are directly affected by this, them choosing not to vote, how could I fault them? I guess I couldn't really blame them. Like, yeah, sure, the alternative between one candidate versus the other is worse, especially for them. But it was hard for me to make the argument and say, you should still vote for Harris anyway. Because that's very logical and that's very, left brain, like this is the right thing to do. But there's no clear way to make an emotional argument for that. Sure, you know what the right answer is, but you still feel like you're participating in this. So I get it, and I understand why they made the choice they did. And if you can't, I get that. I would just urge you to put yourself in their shoes, see it from their perspective for just a moment, and think about what casting that ballot would have meant for them and for their family. As the sun started to set, the rally starts. The crowd's energy was higher than ever. At this point, the organizers gathered everyone and a sing-along commenced. There was a palpable feeling of hope in the air. I remarked to the girl next to me that It felt good to be surrounded by others who care so much about this cause. Because this country, it makes you feel crazy that seemingly nobody else does. As night fell, the chant started and continued for many hours. There were so many food donations, the organizers had to ask to stop for fear of food waste. There was a medic on hand in case anybody got sick or fell injured. There was a real sense of community I had never felt before, solidified by the popular chant, "Who keeps us safe? We keep us safe." It was organized, it was peaceful, and police luckily did not get involved. Concern 3. Is this anti-Semitic? Okay, I'm gonna address the elephant in the room. No, it's not. And I will not entertain the fantasy that it is. There are people dying, and we don't support that. I, of course, will not deny the reality that instances of anti-Semitism have gone up. A select few have even claimed to do it in the name of this movement. However, that is a very small minority of opportunistic people who are using this movement to further their cause. A cause that the movement at large heavily denounces. Hence organizations like Jewish Voices for Peace. Anti-Semitism is unequivocally not okay. Neither is, need I remind you, Islamophobia, which has also skyrocketed. But of course, that's never brought up, is it? Because most people making this argument, most people, don't actually care about anti-Semitism. And those that genuinely do are funneled by the mainstream media into thinking that college kids, by and large, are being indoctrinated into some like weird anti-Semitic movement.
You have a social media ecosystem environment in which context, history, facts get lost, and the emotion, the impact of images dominates.
Images are powerful, aren't they? College kids are not, in large, falling into some anti-Semitic movement. They simply recognize the reality of a horrifying situation. And when older generations talk down to us as if we don't know what we're talking about, it is simply for the purpose of belittling and demeaning a movement that, by and large, challenges the status quo. Because this kind of political mobilization is scary to them, but it's not at all unprecedented. And frankly, it's not enough. It's just not enough. And I guess I don't know what to do about that. I'm standing outside the one place in the entire country that has the ability to do anything about this. I'm surrounded by hundreds of other people. Some are protesting, some are taking pictures, some are angry, some are happy to be here. And I feel tired. I feel so tired of all of this. I had a whole thing planned, kind of had an idea of what I wanted to say. But the truth is, at a certain point, it all just came rushing to me. And I don't really know what to say. And if you've ever seen one of my videos before, you should know that's pretty astonishing. But I think I know what I have to say, even if I don't want to admit it. I have to. So at this point, I decided to go back to Mom. Much like Mom does, I was about to go back to talking about political violence and radical change and the notion that things are, still worth fighting for. But a lot has happened since then. As of last week, I'm not even sure I can say the words political violence on YouTube anymore without it being connected to something else. And so I thought I'd return to Malm's vision of the future, his criticisms of the pacifist movement underpinning climate change ideology, and even the intricacies of good and bad violence. But I just don't care. And I hate that. I hate that I feel this beaten down. I've cared so much and for so long. And it still feels like everything's so hopeless. The more time that passes, the less things seem to get better. I'm just being honest. So instead of the original third act I had planned, forget all of that. I want to offer you something different. I want to offer understanding. Because if you felt this way, this feeling of powerlessness, this feeling that I've discovered feeling many times over the last few months, I get it. It hurts. It really hurts. And that's what they took from us. That's the quintessential example of Gen Z politics, apathy, and despair that I could give you. This is the real, tangible effect this has on the youth. I can't portray it any clearer than that. We are angry, we're frustrated, we're tired of inaction, and we're feeling pretty hopeless. But we don't give up. The world is getting worse, yet we care so much more. Why?
Like, I know that we wouldn't have gotten anywhere if we were pessimistic, if we were nihilist. The political establishment will never get better. Things will never change in that way unless we force them to do so.
We are going backwards at an unprecedented way. I never would have thought 5 years ago this is where we would be.
I don't think there's any other choice other than to have hope.
I'm a bit of a pessimist in general, so I really don't think hope is the right word.
Do not go gently into that dark night, right? Don't just roll over and allow things to happen.
There are kids that are getting this knowledge and that they're actually seeing the world for what it is, so that when they grow up, they'll actually want to change it in a more radical and revolutionary way. That gives me hope. The future.
I don't know how it's going to be possible, but you can't have a future without believing there's going to be one. You just can't. If you're in this mindset of maybe we won't make it, or oh, maybe this will happen, you can't live in maybe. You have to live with the idea that we're going to make it. We have to make it.
Having no hope for the future only benefits people who are currently benefiting from the status quo. So I think it's important, even if I might not believe it 100%, to still act like I have hope for the future, and to still vote and go to protests and do anything in my power to try to change things for our generation and for future generations, because I don't really see the point in anything else otherwise.
Do you know how many people I have seen that say oh, I'm not a political person, or I don't care about politics? You don't understand what that means. Clearly you don't. You are politics. You and the people you love are in this world, and you are actively not saving it. Think about that for 5 minutes.
Hopelessness and love go hand in hand for a generation being brought up in a time like this. However, perspective is a really important thing. For example, right now, it's hard not to feel as though the world is getting worse. Seeing things like this is not normal. Being connected to a constant flow of information is strange and unnerving, but if you get too comfortable, then you grow complacent. You can always ignore just how bad things are, but turning a blind eye to the issues of the world is only gonna make them worse. You think I wanted to make a video about politics? This is awful. Politics suck. I hate talking about politics. I'm well aware this video will not be a fun rewatch, but ignoring the world only alleviates the pain for a time. That's what Instagram Reels are for.
Watching Reels will help you figure out what you want to be in life.
Achieving your dreams could be just one scroll away.
Oh, old friend, how I've missed you. But believe it or not, as terrible as everything feels, it's not as bad as it could be. The world is kind of in one of the best spots it's ever been in. If you look at a timeline of the world from 1900 to 2000, you'll get a much fuller picture. You'll very quickly learn that things have not always been this stable. It's hard to understand that in a time like this when you look at all the horrors in the world, precisely because you have such easy access to it. But it's true.
Despite the news, despite all the rancor, the truth is if you had to be born at any time in human history and you didn't know who you were going to be ahead of time, you would choose now because the world is actually healthier, wealthier, better educated, more tolerant.
That was very hopeful, but also weirdly bleak. Coming from the hope and change guy, I was kind of expecting more. If this is the advice being offered to Gen Z for coping with a world that's natural resting state is unease, to say the least, then I don't know if we're gonna make it. So we should probably offer an alternative, right? Look me in the eyes. I'm gonna fix you. So if despair is the apparent natural resting state of the world, how do we counteract that? Well, some would say you don't. Everything sucks, we're all gonna die, we should all just do drugs and have a good time. Doomerism is a very popular path for a hopeless Gen Z person. Generation Z, or Z if you have some choice words about the Irish, is very prone to doomerism. And the reason for that is any one of my videos in the last 2 years. I should have written a dissertation about this by now. We are completely and utterly addicted to our phone in order to sedate our minds from the natural resting state of boredom and unease. We cling to things like Twitter and TikTok despite the mountains of evidence that all it does is hurt us more. And because of this, we're rendered terminally online Zoomers who know more about online discourse than basic geography. But even that's a bit too simplistic, isn't it? That read kind of makes it feel like a rational, well thought out decision that we're all making. But it's not, because the internet is the all-encompassing force driving the development of this generation. It's quite literally ingrained in our brains from the age we're first born. That's why the idea of an iPad baby induces so much dread in this generation. I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with full-blown Instagram addicts about how sad it makes them that the younger generation is so plugged in nowadays. Bro, that's you. Time is a circular loop and you're uncomfortable because you're watching your own reflection in a mirror from behind. It's not a rational choice. It's quite literally an addiction. It's the only choice. And I know I throw that word around a lot, but it's because I have a really complicated relationship with all of this. And when I say it, I mean it. The thesis of my most popular video at time of recording is to delete TikTok. You know, back when I was doe-eyed and still had hope. Now, in my last video, the conclusion was pure mitigation. Use the phone less, maybe go outside sometimes. That gradual shift is the problem. When you're accepting a new reality every few years because the status quo won't change and you're just expected to go along with it, it's because you're fundamentally powerless to do anything about everything. So where's the hope? How are you supposed to have hope in any of this? What are you possibly expected to do? We do what we always do. We just keep going. Because even though me and my optimism aren't gonna save the world, and they're not always realistic or feasible, it's still much better than the alternative. This argument for doomerism is substantially worse. And it's not just worse for Gen Z, it's worse for every generation. Yeah, that's right, I'll bridge the generational gap. Millennials, Gen X, stop fighting. Get over here. The thing about doomerism is it's not just about feeling like the world is getting worse and worse. It's more than that. If you feel unease, that's completely normal. That's natural. That's understandable. But if you take it one step further and you fall into doomerism ideology, like anything on the internet, it becomes a community. You can form an identity around it. From depressed Wojak memes to algorithms that will only take you further and further down the rabbit hole of despair, hopelessness, which will only lead you to drive deeper and deeper into it. This kind of group self-abuse is common online and starts to be propped up as an ideal to aspire to, as communities start to form around this shared feeling. The classic example of this, of course, being incels, as they have a documented history with this kind of communal conditioning. They aren't a support group for people who feel hopeless. They're a group who actively discourages hope amongst its members. That's also what doomerism does. It laughs in the very face of hope. The world is ever evolving, and thus we adapt to it. The reason we have to keep going along with the changes of the world is because the world is constantly changing. That's not powerlessness. It's life. In life, you don't get to control everything. That's just how things are sometimes. And so, we keep moving. And we don't stop moving. Because despair is a powerful drug. Perpetually accepting a new reality every few years due to factors out of your control. What does that remind you of? This generation is the last one to inherit an Earth that is inhabitable on all parts. We have blown past the idea of changing our ways in order to save the climate. Now we just endlessly debate each other on just how bad things are gonna get. Climate scientists are literally the most depressed people you will ever meet in your life. What we've done to our Earth is an inarguable, tangible fact. And half the population still doesn't even agree it's a thing. Hopelessness is not a cult of internet brain-rotted teens who want to be edgy. It's just the reality a generation is growing up in. People are actively choosing not to have children because they worry the very idea of bringing life into this world at this point in time is unethical. We are inheriting a world that's monumentally screwed, and there's nothing we can do about it. The most prominent voice leading the charge on climate activism right now is a girl around my age. Because nobody else cares. We were somehow tasked with the impossible job of fixing the world, and then we're given no resources to do literally anything about it. When I say we're economically, politically, and socially isolated, I mean it. With the weight of the world on our shoulders and no ability to hold it up. If that's not powerlessness, I don't know what is. Solving the problems of climate change, inequality, internet addiction is what we can call a super task, which is a really fascinating concept that just means one enormous problem isn't actually just one thing. It means getting down into it and solving, separate, smaller, huge problems. We can't solve climate change without addressing inequality because electric and other means of getting energy is just more expensive than fossil fuels. We can't expect people or countries with less economic resources to just adapt at the same rate as the US because that's not fair. That's not how that works. We can't just solve inequality without understanding the history of economic and racial discrimination and violence in this country and provide resources for dealing with things such as poverty and trauma. And we can't solve internet addiction because it's fun. Love is about devoting time, energy, and resources into the things you care about. Love is about hearing out problems and accepting that you can't be the only one to solve them, but it starts with you. Love is about empathy. If you don't understand the experiences of others, no matter how much good you do, you will always be fundamentally missing the point. Intersectionality. This all always comes back to Crenshaw's theory of intersectionality. The world is a series of compounding effects. You can't address one without addressing the others. That's the most simplistic way I can put it. But you know what? I'm Gen Z. I'm 19 years old. And if I and many other of my peers can understand all this, then that's half the battle. Now we just have to figure out what to do about it. And that right there is the fundamental problem. We are out of time. It's on its way at speed. We don't have time for our generation to grow up miraculously against all odds, somehow find the resources to fix things, find the cure to our problem, and then achieve enough voting power to enact literally anything meaningful. While older generations perpetually debate whether or not there even is a problem. It's demeaning, borderline patronizing, and most of all, it's hopeless. You can choose not to be demoralized, but you can't choose not to be powerless. That's just not how things work. And because of that, because of all of this, I am completely and utterly hopeless. They did it again. A new encampment has formed. Hundreds of protesters sleep outside the original encampment in solidarity. More signs, extra tents, a new morale. Police are swarming around this area now, yet it remains peaceful. It's 3:34 in the morning, and the people are restless. Conversations fill the air. It's buzzing with optimism. A place like this does not know dread. I feel a sense of urgency I haven't before. The signs hung around. They preach of anger. They place direct blame. They don't shy away from the truth. It's refreshing. After walking around and experiencing this atmosphere, at 4:32 a.m., I head home. But one image sticks out in my mind amongst everything else from that night. It wasn't right to capture it on camera, but I'll never forget it. So at this point, there may be a dozen or so people left in the original encampment, having been outside for days with no facilities and limited access to essentials. They have faced fierce aggression, condemnation, and in some cases, suspension. But at nearly 4:30 in the morning, I lay my eyes on this girl, and she's on the other side of the encampment. She's probably been in there for days, on the phone, sobbing. I had no idea if she had found out some horrible news. She could have been arguing with her parents. She could have had her scholarship revoked. Maybe it was the stress of everything coming crashing down at once. I don't know. But I will never forget that image. Because even in that moment, which has got to be a low, she cared more about people on the opposite side of the world. People that she will never meet. More than she cared about her own problems. And that feeling, that relentless drive, that unabashed belief in your cause, that spoke to me. That's everything. That gave me hope. Because that's who we are. That's why we keep going. No matter what. No matter how bleak it gets. So what are we gonna do about it? Well, in chapter 3 of How to Blow Up a Pipeline, Mom discusses this feeling of constant internal struggle with fighting despair in the chapter aptly titled Fighting Despair. Writers, so uncreative. He describes hope as a moral positive because without it, we're left to fester in our own discomfort, which is climate fatalism. Climate fatalism is his doomerism. We all have our battles. I'm trying to save the world. He's also trying to save the world. But you know what? I'm on your screen right now, and you only know his name because of me. So who's laughing now, Andreas? Narcissism aside, the guy actually has some good points. He claims hope is imperative for fighting climate fatalism because without a future to aspire to, especially for Gen Z, despair is the logical outcome, and despair leads to inaction, which causes the very climate we are so fatalist about to begin with. Every time I turn on the AC in my car, I picture the Koch brothers laughing at me. Climate fatalism, and in our case, doomerism, is an ideology peddled by people who have a low view of the movement, fueled by pessimism and personal shortcomings. Hope is, in itself, a radical act of will that must never be lost, 'cause you're a human being, a pioneer, an explorer. I'm animated, I'm alive, my heart's big, it's got hot blood going through it. Doing something, anything, about the problems in the world is better than doing nothing. And it's a beautiful high, 'cause it mattered.
If destroying fences was an act of violence, it was violence of the sweetest kind. I was high for weeks afterwards. All the despair that climate breakdown generates on a daily basis was out of my system, if only temporarily.
So, Mom's solution for despair? How about you go outside and do something about it? And to that, I say yes. Yes. And they put lead in my water. Can't prove it yet, but there's definitely something going on there. Okay, Clearly, doomerism and hopelessness are not going to save us, but neither is blind optimism. So what to do now? Well, I suppose I could put forward some of my feelings and thoughts surrounding realistic optimism into the conversation. Ugh, ew. Feelings. Step number 1.
First and foremost, organizing could be fun. I used to view protesting as something other people did. I never seemed to know about them. They always just happened to be at times I was busy. But the truth is, they're actually pretty easy to find and get to if you just put a little effort in. Organizing is one of the most effective ways to get your voices heard. Protests are often picked up by the news media, which is a very effective way to get your message out there. You can get a lot more done on a local scale than you can nationally. Organizing also does so much for personal morale, as instead of standing back and watching the world get worse, you actually get to do something about it, which is cool.
Next, don't listen to the mainstream all the time, especially on issues they're known to be biased against. I'm not saying the mainstream is fake news at all, but when it's discovered that their journalism is biased, or particularly when it's being run directly through one of the parties in an ongoing active conflict, maybe just like take it with a grain of salt. No news source is 100% perfect. They all have their baggage. This is where any good YouTuber would normally put a ground news sponsorship, but unfortunately, unrelated, here's my business email. Flat tire on the side of the road. Roadside assistance won't be out here for 2 more hours. That's awesome. Let's keep going. I'm gonna finish this video or I'm gonna die, whichever comes first. Next is spread your message. If you care about something deeply, shout it from the rooftops. Unless you're a public figure, in which case keep it to yourself. Talk about it with your friends and family. If necessary, share resources and links on social media, and continue to follow the news about it. Keep updated and make sure you're in the know. Unless it's climate change, you might not like what you find. Furthermore, correct mis and disinformation whenever you get the chance. And I cannot stress this enough. This and many other steps are most valuable with your in-person friends and family. Sharing information on your Instagram story is great and all, you know. It can be genuinely helpful for spreading info. I'm not knocking that, but nothing beats the trust, care, delicate connection, and various intricacies of taking time to sit down with someone whom you care about a lot and explain the reality of the situation. Because connection and understanding is so much more important than money. If you have extra money, you should give it to a cause you care about. And I'm not just talking about the Mia Cole Patreon, although that is a very worthy cause. Donate to things that matter. I'll be donating a portion of this video's ad revenue to the PCRF. Individual action can't solve the world, but, you know, numbers do add up. Good points on both sides. All sides, good points. Good points on all sides. I think that man over there is staring at me. Finally, and most importantly, reframe your thinking. This means both maintaining your perspective, understanding that although things are bad now, the world is in a fundamentally much better place than it's ever been in, as well as not falling into the traps of mental anguish that permeate many of these doomer types. Little actions do add up to a whole. If you care about something, continue to push for it. Don't allow the natural ebb and flow of the 24-hour news cycle to make you forget. You are not powerless. You always have the ability to take action. Oh my God, he's peeing. The very concept of the generational divide works solely to divide us. It masks the real problem, and the real problem is that the older generations won't do anything about the problems that they are handing the world over to us with. And that's why I made this video, because this is silly. Also, I really needed the money. It's all about hope. It's about never giving up. Social media companies, the people in power, and the system at large are all working together seemingly to put you in a state of mental anguish and powerlessness so you won't change the status quo. But you know why they do it? Because at the end of the day, we are powerful. It doesn't feel like it all the time, but their job is to make us happy. We are the will of the people. And in 2 years, if I get really famous, I didn't mean a word of that. Like, not even for a second. Like, I probably have way too much money to be dealing with your problem. We have to keep going, fight the despair, and get back up. Because at the end of the day, we gotta remember what it is we're fighting for.
I think it's kind of just really just focusing on what you have power over. There's a lot out of my control as a person.
We've been here before, and this is nothing new, and that you just can't get complacent. Like, if you get complacent, you won't be able to make that change you want to see in this world. If you get nihilist, if you get doomers. And I know it's very easy to adhere to these ideologies and principles.
Going in real life and seeing that there are a lot of people that have empathy and want things to get better, and it's not just you and like your close friends, that helps a lot because it feels less isolating.
We've been here before. This is nothing new. So just remember that. Like, you know, what the fuck is that compliment, man? You exist in the context.
And doomerism doesn't help anyone. Like, you're not getting any change done if you're just like drug, gloom, and doom all the time. Like, you have to have some ability to uplift yourself, to uplift others in order to create like real change. And I don't think doomerism is even real life. Like, just get off the internet.
So I guess what I'm trying to say is we're gonna be fine. God, stop worrying about us all the time. We're fine. If I have to sit through one more Generation sketch video, I'm gonna lose it. And so finally, to get some closure on all of this, I return once more to the immortal parting words of Professor Scott Galloway. A man I trust will know just what to say in a situation like this.
By the way, my advice to every young person watching this program is go out, drink more, and make a series of bad decisions that might pay off.
Part 4, cancel Eminem. Gen Z, en masse, has been known to have a fetishistic desire for blood. We lust for the fall of our enemies. And our number one enemy, Marshall Mathers, of Slim Shady fame.
Gen Z's trying to cancel Eminem?
Yes, it's time. If Gen Z rallies together behind the noble cause of canceling a 50-something-year-old man, I don't know, it just might fix us. It just might. And yeah, it's time. I'm gonna cancel that white baby hard style. I'm canceling this white baby hard style. I'm going sicko mode on this white baby. I'm gonna stop saying, I don't like that at all. I'm doing it out of spite and maybe boredom. Pros and cons of canceling Eminem by Gen Z. By canceling Eminem, Gen Z obtains a thing to do, an activity. Is the new generation hopeless, or are they just 17 and that's just what you sound like then?